Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game Over Ottawa. Maud and Charlie back here again to finally recap the Ottawa Senators offseason. Almost 2 weeks after free agency now, all the dust has settled. Moves seem to be dying down, although the Sens do have a little bit of space that they could potentially work with here. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the way we're going to frame it today is we're going to be giving Steve Staios' offseason a letter grade in terms of how well we think he did with the options that were presented to him. So, Charlie, I'll throw it to you first. How would you grade the offseason moves overall?
Um, I'm giving Steve, you know, uh, with the expectation that he signs maybe a couple more depth pieces, like kind of, your fourth line forward or maybe like a depth defenseman as well. I'll say a B minus depending on how those potential, depth moves might go. Maybe he could push it to a B, but I think I'm firmly in like a B minus kind of territory right now.
That's perfect because B minus is exactly what I was going to say too. Um, I feel like the B range is sort of like meeting expectations, so the B minus would be on the slightly lower end of it. And I think to get an A, he would have had to pull something off that was way out of our expectations. You could say
Mhm.
that the Olmark trade was kind of that, but we were all kind of expecting the Olmark trade to happen for a while before it led up to it, before it actually happened. So even though that trade itself is probably an A plus, it also happened way before the rest of the offseason moves. So we're kind of, even though that one is still included, we're kind of recapping like everything else here today, right? So I would lean more to a B minus overall as well, because I don't want to go C. I think I could potentially go into the C range if we didn't add a couple other players with the remaining cap space, like you said. If we get a couple other guys for like the fourth line or one third pairing D. There's not a lot of room, a little bit less than 2 million, but I don't know. If you could sign two guys to like 900K each, it could be doable. If
Mhm.
we get some decent depth guys like that, it could even go up to like a B or a B plus. But I pretty much agree with B minus.
Yeah, I think it's firmly a C if you're looking at everything post Allmark trade. Which I mean, like he's passing. It's not impressive, but he's passing. So, yeah, like I don't know how you feel about this. I think the team objectively looks better than it did before the offseason began, but I think the Allmark trade is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that statement. Um, yeah, I don't know how you feel in general about some of these other moves, but I think like so for all the other moves, because like you said, Allmark trade, I think that's an A plus across the board for all Sens fans. I think we can all agree that that was like so much better than any of us expected. So I can kind of, maybe use some of that credit to kind of even out some of the other deals, but I can see the vision with all the other moves. Like I can see why these other moves were made. My problem with most of them, it just feels like poor um asset management. Like it feels
Yep.
like you're paying a little too much to get a little too little in return, even if the moves make sense on paper. I think just from a pure value point of view, it seems a little bit uh I don't know, it doesn't seem quite fair in terms of value, but again, like I can understand pretty much every move that's been made, so at least there's a way to defend what's been done. But yeah, I don't know how do you feel about just I guess just broadly talking about moves that have been made. Like, are you happy with how the team's looking now?
I agree with what you said there too, in terms of all the moves have a justification and they make sense. There wasn't any moves where I was like, why on earth are they doing this? It's all like, okay, I get why they did that, even if I don't love, say, the value of the contract or the value returned in a trade. Um, but in terms of the team on paper, I would say it looks pretty good. Probably not enough of an improvement on paper for me to be like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to be a playoff team next year. Mostly just because of how this team has let us down in the last couple of
Mm,
years, and really it all hinges on
yeah.
Travis Green's coaching too, because the lineup could be looking pretty mid on paper, but if he has like a Jack Adams worthy year, he could pull something off. We've seen stranger things before.
If
We remember when Paul McLean came in, right? We could get something like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, if the Sens make the playoffs, how is he not a Jack Adams finalist? Just because that's what happens, right? Who's the bad team that made the playoffs this year? Their
Yeah,
coach is going to be a finalist. So
exactly. I think like
yeah,
Washington's coach, I think he got. I don't think he won, but did he get nominated for the
I
Jack
think he
Adams?
was. Yeah, yeah, I
And
think he
so it
was.
would
I'll have to double check that.
probably be a situation like that. Um, Even if he wasn't though, he may not have been. There was a lot of good candidates for the Jack Adams. So point
I did
being,
not pay attention to the awards this
yeah,
year. I don't know about you.
no, me neither, me neither. So I'm just like guessing that off the top of my head. But the point is, a lot of it is going to come down to the coaching. So we'll discuss all of how the roster looks on paper
No.
right now. But it could. Was I totally wrong? I was totally
It
wrong,
was
wasn't I?
so Rick Tocchet won, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Brunette and Rick Bowness were the nominees.
Talkett is also a like not a bad team to make the playoffs, but unexpected team to do like way better than they did. It's about outperforming the
Yeah.
expectations. So I feel like with how the roster is looking, we might need a little bit of that to carry the team this year. But the one good thing I'll say is that Steos did bring in a lot of great veteran presence this year, which that
Mhm.
should help. That should help with that sort of a sort of
Yeah.
improving the team culture for sure.
Yeah, without getting too detailed in any of the moves specifically, if I just by bringing up names like that the Sens brought in, whether it's you know, uh, I guess Nick Jensen the trade, that's bringing in some veteran, some experience there, but like David Perron specifically, like it makes sense because in the top nine forwards, is Giroux the only guy over 30? He must be. He might be the only guy over like 28,
I think
27.
so.
So I think that makes sense, yeah, to bring in some vets, especially like, you know, Braun has one cup, two cups, two cups,
I think
one cup.
one with
Just St.
St. Louis,
Louis?
right? I think he
Yeah,
made
he
the
might have just
finals with
missed.
Vegas, but obviously
Made the finals of
they
Vegas.
didn't win the first time.
He was in Pittsburgh at some point, wasn't he? I'm probably like, I don't
Yeah,
remember
I don't
exactly
know. I
when,
don't know if he won with them, but
but yeah, some so definitely like like some, and I guess also Mike Amadio was
put it
on
this way:
Vegas.
Mike Amadio, Nick Jensen, and David Perron all Cup winners.
Okay, that's a much, yeah, that's a better way of framing it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, streamlined, concise. I like it.
And even
Yeah,
Linus Ullmark doesn't have that cup pedigree, but he has a Vezina and President's Trophy on the best regular season team of all time, I think, before they lost to the Panthers in the first round. I think they did set the record, right? It was like 65 wins. So even though it's not playoff success, that's some winning pedigree right there. And he's already been talking about in interviews how he wants to come here and win and help change the culture and improve the team.
oh my
They've
God.
all been saying that, all of these guys coming in.
Yeah. Allmark specifically, though, I have never fallen in love with a player as quickly as I have with Allmark. Oh my God. I've watched, I don't know if he's had more interviews and stuff that I've missed. I haven't seen, he was doing like the big podcast tour for a bit there. He was talking to a lot of podcasts. I haven't had the time to tune into any of those yet. Um, but like from his first Zoom availability and that video of him getting the tour around CTC, like that's what a total of maybe 7.5 minutes that I didn't watch the whole Zoom thing. I just watched the highlights from that someone had posted on Twitter, I guess. So in the span of about 5.5 minutes of just footage of this guy, I'm already like I'm ready to kill for him. Like I love him so much already. And I want him to sign an extension so bad. So bad.
Yeah, talk about endearing yourself to the fans like right away. Lots of interviews and coming to the city really early in the summer too, when we're still like over 2 months away from training camp, I believe. So
Yeah.
he doesn't need to be here for any reason other than like trying to find a home, trying to get like the family situated and stuff. So it's awesome to see him coming here really early for that because I think that shows that he's excited to be here. And I don't know if we want to get into like whether or not we should extend him right away, but maybe the fact that he's shown up to the city so early shows that he's really open to seeing how things go here, and he's excited to try to make it work. You know?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, best goalie since Anderson, maybe, depending on how his career goes, probably ends up being a better goalie than Anderson when it comes to like when you look at a full career, right?
Man,
So
even if he's average for us and doesn't re-sign, he will probably be the best goalie since since Craig Anderson.
yeah, so I mean it's a low bar. I don't want to make that sound like anything against Allmark. It's a very, very low bar, but like the dude's unbelievable. He's shown that he can be dominant on a good team. He's shown he can be great on a bad team in Buffalo. Like honestly, I'm ready to resign I'm ready to give him extension like immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like I understand why he wouldn't want to do that. He's in a new place. I can see why he'd want to play out the season, number one, just to see if he likes it, see if his family likes it here, and just to see how the team does as well. If last season was playoffs or bust, this season is so important just between trying to hold on to Allmark, trying to re-sign Giroux, who's probably going to want to go cup hunting in the last few years of his career. Like this team doesn't have very many veterans, but the ones that they do have this season is so important on contract years. So I'm like, it's not even mid-July and I'm already stressed out about the season. Oh God, this is gonna be a rough year. Like even if they do well, I'm gonna be so stressed out the whole time.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing.
Oh,
On the question of an Allmark extension, I'm already like thinking, okay, well, where's that cap space going to come from? And then I started
oh
looking
my
looking at
God.
the Puckpedia roster breakdown because we can't use cap friendly anymore as of yesterday. And then I'm already thinking like, well, we're totally getting ahead of ourselves if we're going to talk about like who deserves a raise next year, who might be gone,
Hmm.
who takes a pay cut. So that's already, even talking about an Allmark extension, that is Steve Staios' job to look ahead and forecast all of that stuff for next year. I
Yeah.
think we would be getting a little too far ahead of ourselves, but if we did get Allmark to an extension before the season starts or during the season, if he's playing really well, I would definitely be very happy with that. I'm sure everyone in the fan base would be.
Oh yeah. Depending on how that's the problem too, right? Depending on how Giroux plays, he probably doesn't take much of a pay cut if he stays. You got to sign Greg after this year to probably a bridge deal as well. Oh, it's gonna be tough. It's so tough. I
Hmm.
hate being a cap team. I love being a cap. I love being a fan of a cap team, but I hate being the fan of a cap team. This is so tough.
Yeah, it's tough either way. It's tough when your team doesn't spend money, and then it's tough when they do spend money because they have to make really tough decisions. Certain players that we like end up getting moved out just because of contracts. Matthew Joseph, for example. But we'll get into that a little later. I think for now, I want to throw it to the Jakob Chychrun trade because we were talking about earlier about certain moves that we understand the rationale of, but the value isn't quite there at full value. And also, since our last episode was basically an hour of making Jakob Chychrun mock trades, and
Yeah.
the return on the trade ended up not being close to what the Sens were originally asking for. I will say, to defend ourselves a little bit, is that we weren't totally pie in the sky because the asking price was reported as being very high. What I
Mhm.
think happened was we were not able to get close to signing any of those right defensemen in free agency. So Steve Staios figured I have to get one. I have to take the best one
Yeah.
who's available in a trade, regardless of if the value is that good. Because if they did trade Chychrun for a first and a prospect, we could have been like, oh yeah, good return, good return. And then we don't sign any right defenseman in free agency because no one wants to come here. And then the defense looks like crap for next year. So I think even though I don't love the value of the trade, that's what the situation ended up being, eh?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. DeMello gets re-signed and Steve goes, "Oh shit." And then Tanev's rights get traded to Toronto and he's like, "Oh fuck, he's gonna stay there, isn't he?" And then
Yep, and then
I mean,
Carrier
Pesci was never
stays in
coming
Nashville,
here and
and
yeah.
then Matt Roy wanted to go to Washington, who we made the trade with. So I don't think he was too interested in coming here instead.
That one stings. I
Hmm.
really wanted Matt Roy.
That was the tough part, was seeing the trade come in with kind of low value, and then Matt Roy signed like 10 minutes later with Washington, and it was like a double whammy, you know. But
What a pairing that's gonna be, eh?
yeah, Washington is actually looking pretty good for next year. It all depends on how much
Ovi's getting that
Ovechkin.
record.
It depends on how much Ovechkin can dip into the fountain of youth. But they added some great players. I think they're definitely going to be back in the playoffs next year.
Yeah, everyone's talking about Nashville as the offseason winners. I think Washington's got to be a top five,
Hmm.
like improvement at least through the offseason so far. I'm
I
mad.
will
I'm mad
say
about it.
I will say the one thing about the chicken trade that makes me a little bit more positive about the value is that he has not signed an extension from Washington so
Hmm.
far. I think that if he signed an extension soon after the trade, then it would be looking really bad because it's like, oh, they had an extension ready to go and you still couldn't get any more value. But the fact is that they did trade him as a 1 year rental. Maybe we'll see an extension later on in the offseason, but obviously that still has to be negotiated if Chychrun wants to do that. So I'm
Yeah.
glad at least that he did not get traded with an extension for this trade value. I think if that happened, we would have needed to get a lot more.
Yeah. Really quick, just like in a sentence, at the moment, how do you feel about the Chychrun trade? Because if you're okay with it, I would like to read what you sent me the day of,
Oh God,
just to
I
see how it's changed in the last 10 days.
this is probably going to be a common pattern in this episode. Is that on July 1st, I was pretty mad. I don't know if I was just in a bad mood that day or what, but I was very negative that day, and I think over the last 2 weeks, I have become more positive overall about most of the team's moves. Um, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know it was bad. I think I'll put it this way: we did an overall letter grade for the offseason. I would probably have this trade individually at like a C plus in terms of value.
Okay.
I think Nick Jensen is a very good acquisition, and I think he's going to help the team. It's just that you trade a defenseman who is like 6 or 7 years younger than Nick Jensen and has more. I don't know. It's hard to gauge value between like an offensive minded left-handed D and a defensive minded right D because right D are so
Yeah.
rare. But it just feels like Chychrun, just because of the hype, it feels like he should have returned more. I feel like it's not so much about Jensen, but about the pick in the trade only being a third round pick. If it was a second or even a first would probably be pushing it with Jensen included in the deal, but I feel like we could have at
Yeah.
least gotten a second, and that would have made me a little more happy about the value. But yeah, what was
Yeah.
my initial reaction? Pull it up.
So you messaged me on July 1st, and just to show how um busy it's been, that it's been 10 days before we were both able to record, you sent me a message and said, want to record an episode tomorrow after all the dust settles? I feel like I'm too angry to speak level-headedly. So
Yeah,
I mean, I was pissed too, but um yeah, that's that trade still feels a little bit brutal, and I think it's just brutal because of what we think Chychrun's value should have been.
especially since
This
we
is
only traded for him like a year and a half ago and gave up way
Yeah, it
more.
was like 16 months. And in that 16 months, his value went from a first and 2 seconds, where the first was 12th overall. Uh, and then it just turns into an aging second pair, I'll say hopefully second pair quality defenseman and a third round pick. That seems a bit nuts because like it's not like he had a bad year. He had double digit goals. He had 41 points. He played 82 games for the first time in his career, and somehow that tanks his value. Like
Mm,
he has 1 year left. I guess he had like 2 years and a bit, like 2 years and whatever was left after the deadline when the Sens acquired him. So like I guess that has something to do with it. And I guess, every team knew Ottawa was going to try and trade him, so the price is going to come down. Um, I don't know. It's wild how much that value tanked,
it really
but
is because his defensive game wasn't great. I think he finished with like a
yeah.
minus 30. But the thing is, the Sens with the by far the worst goaltending in the league,
Hmm.
the plus minus is very much affected by that. And I think everyone knew that he wasn't like a amazing defensive guy originally. He's definitely offensive minded, and his offense was
Hmm.
good overall. So it is tough because with the one less year on his contract from when we traded for him, his value should be less. I just don't know if it should be that much less, especially like you said with Jensen being much older. I feel like if Jensen was around the same age as Chychrun, it'd be like, oh, perfect, perfect. But just a player
Yeah.
who's 7 years older and had a down year last year, according to advanced analytics. I don't know how deep we want to get into that, but that's what makes the trade.
It's
That's what makes me lukewarm on the trade, basically.
yeah, and I never like banking on how old is Jensen now? 34?
Either 33 or 34. Not sure
I
when
don't
his
I
birthday
don't
is.
love the idea of banking on a bounce back for someone in their like mid 30s.
Exactly.
And I guess the same thing could be said for David Perron, that signing, but focusing on Jensen, I think like I said at the top of the show, I understand every move. I see the vision. I understand why they made this trade, but like how do you not like would have and like if you just look at the price that the Sens paid, right? It's 12th overall and 2 seconds. Like, does Jensen and the 17th overall pick feel insane? I don't think so.
No, it's a worse first round pick. And then if you were to trade for Nick Jensen on his own, would he cost a first? Or like compared to
Oh no, sorry, actually.
Hmm?
No, was Chychrun the first and the second and the third?
I think it was 2 seconds.
Or is right? No, it was DeBrincat that was first, second, and third.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So, but
Yeah.
like it's a worse first round pick than what we originally gave up by 5 spots. And again, if you were to trade for Jensen on his own just for picks, because obviously Washington was looking to move him out, they signed Matt Roy as the replacement on the right hand side. I don't think he would have
Yeah.
costed much more than 2 seconds or like a late
No.
first, you know? So when you put it that way, I agree.
Yeah. Like just to go back to our mock trades, I think mine was Trevor Van Riemsdyk, the 17th overall pick, and a third.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which
that's
would have been. I feel like that's close to what ended up happening because Jensen is more valuable than TVR. So I think if it was Van Riemsdyk instead, we would have gotten better picks in return. Maybe not a first, but something better in terms of the picks.
Yeah.
I think my mock trades was the 17th overall and either Vinny Iorio or Ryan Chesley, who are both right-hand D as well,
Yeah.
but prospects. They're both like 20 or 21. My mindset there was that we could sign a right D in free agency and then have one of those guys coming up to play behind them for third pair and eventually pass them after the free agent's contract is up. But obviously no one wanted to sign in Ottawa from the crop of right-hand defensemen that were available. Luckily, there were some other players who wanted to sign with the Sens, but it just didn't work out with the right D. So that's why we got the trade that we did.
Yeah, and I think when you add all the right context, the Sens didn't have room for Chychrun. What do they need? They needed a right shot shutdown guy, and they got that.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to be too upset with the trade because I think just like you said, free agency, like the players who fit that who fit that role were gone so fast. So
All I'll say is that I
yeah.
hope that other teams' offers for Chychrun in terms of like futures, I hope that they weren't that good because if you could have gotten like a mid first round pick and a second round pick for Chychrun and then maybe traded like less than that for Jensen, like 2 seconds or a second and a third, and then still gain some draft capital from that.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been preferable to me, but obviously I don't know what offers were out there. So I'm hoping that that wasn't even a possibility, you know?
Yeah, I think Washington getting Chychrun, signing Roy, and that Kempfer for Dubois deal, I think they have zero interest in futures. So I imagine that it was either Chychrun for Jensen. They probably said, "Listen, we'll take Chychrun for Jensen, or we can just keep him." That's probably the
I
conversation
guess
that
so.
they
I
had.
guess so. It's just because they brought in Roy, I figure in my brain I think like, oh, he's the replacement. But
Mm,
I guess they could have still had Roy Jensen and Trevor Van Riemsdyk, but they also have John Carlson, so they definitely would have had too many right D. But maybe they would have kept Jensen and then maybe said, oh well, you can have Trevor Van Riemsdyk instead. And for us, he's a fine player, but it wouldn't be quite as
yeah.
good as Nick Jensen. So yeah,
Yeah, I feel better about Jensen on the second pair than Van
definitely,
Riemsdyk, I think.
definitely. Um, I have a few advanced stats for Nick Jensen up
All right.
that I want to just briefly get into, just to
Sure.
sort of look at the season he had, because the consensus is that he had a worse year last year than he did in previous seasons. Part of that can be chalked up to Washington also just being worse in general than the last couple seasons.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you can really blame it on him, but the thing that I really looked at was who were his most common defense partners, because we're probably going to be playing him with Thomas Chabot. I feel like
Hmm.
stylistically, that would be a very good match, the offensive D and the shutdown guy. And he kind of played with a player like that in Rasmus Sandin for 390 minutes, but
Okay.
Sandin is not on the level of Chabot in terms of offensive ability and puck moving. He's growing as a player, but he's not there yet. In terms of that pairing, the goals percentage, the actual goals, was 48.5, which does rank as the best on the Capitals. So even though it's not great, it's below 50. That was the best that they had amongst all their pairings.
Okay.
So it's like when you see that number on its own, I feel like it's not that good. But in context, compared to the other pairings, it's pretty good. Like Fehervari and Carlson as the first D pairing, who played 720 minutes, they had a worse goals percentage at 46.7. And then there was also, you know what? The other players that Sandin played with, Sandin also played 362 minutes with Van Riemsdyk, and they had a 38 percentage. So that's way worse. Yeah,
That
so
is.
the difference there is key. And he also played 399 minutes with Carlson, and they had 34.6. So you look at it that way. The puck moving lefty in Sandin, his best results were with Nick Jensen. So I think that's a positive right there.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point as well that this is the guy who's going to play with Shabbat a whole bunch, and such an important part of this trade as well that maybe you can't equate to direct value of like the pieces in the trade on paper. Shabbat needs that steady everyday partner because
Mm-hmm.
he just hasn't had that since I guess he played with Zub for a couple years and then Sanderson stole Zub.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was so much Sanderson stealing Zub as much as the Sens management was like, we need to move Travis Hamnick from Sanderson's pairing. This is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I guess just with that and with Shabbat being hurt so much last year, it was tough to find that right fit. So maybe that has something to do with me feeling like Shabbat has been dealing with different defense partners a whole bunch recently. But yeah, if Jensen and Shabbat have that chemistry, and even if I mean worst case scenario, say that it's not working between them, move Zub to Shabbat and Jensen Sanderson probably has a chance of being really good too. So um if worst case, it gives them a bit more flexibility with the top four, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jensen should be a perfectly fine fit on Shabbat's side, you think?
Now, the one caveat with those stats for the Washington Capitals is that if you switch from actual goals percentage to expected goals percentage,
Hmm.
Jensen, both of the pairings that Jensen played on the most are actually down to the bottom. The other pairings had better expected goals for, but way worse results. So it depends on which you favor
Mm.
more, the actual results or the expected, That's the thing. Like Sandin and Jensen, in terms of the goal share, they were at the top, but in terms of the expected goals for, they're at 41.7. They're last out of the six most common pairings for the Capitals. So it's an interesting dichotomy there. I don't know. I don't know what to put more
Yeah.
stock into.
Yeah, I don't know what to buy into. Um, I, can you just chalk it up to the fact that that's a weird team?
I
That
think
it's like the
so.
worst team to make the playoffs maybe in our lifetime?
It could be
Um,
in terms of their record, in
Honestly,
terms of the overall point total for the
goal
team. Yeah,
differential,
and the goal
like
difference.
brutal. So you got to think that like everything about that team makes no sense. I'm just gonna
Hmm.
chalk up to that and not overthink it too much because I'm just gonna confuse myself.
Do you want another weird stat as well regarding to the
Please.
to the
Yeah.
Sandin and Jensen pairing? So
Yeah.
if we look at Corsi, which is also the numbers are comparable to the expected goals, some I would assume the Corsi is a large part of that expected goal stat as well. The Corsi percentage for Sandin and Jensen was 42%, not great. But then when you have Jensen on his own without Rasmus Sandin, it actually goes up to 45.7%. So
Weird.
even though that pairing had the best actual goals percentage at 5-on-5, the Corsi for Jensen was better without Sandin, which is interesting as well. Maybe that means that Jensen is more the better player on that pair. We don't know. But
Yeah,
it's
that
I
might
guess
just be.
it's hard to get a read on these stats. It's really weird.
Yeah, is that just a matter of, maybe they're getting fewer chances if you focus on Jensen, but he's just suppressing so well that even though Sandin's the guy putting up the offense, it's still a net positive when you remove the offense and just focus on Jensen's like shot suppression or chance something. I don't know. I have no idea.
Hmm.
That's
It's
weird.
really
That's so
strange.
strange. That's
Yeah,
really odd.
and then
Wow.
his other most common partner was Joel Edmondson too, who is obviously not a puck mover. That's a pure like shutdown
Yeah.
pairing with the two of those guys together. And
Tell me it's at least decent with the two of them.
with the two of them, it's better. It's 46.5 for the Corsi
All right.
percentage, and then Jensen's is actually worse without Joel Edmondson. Goes down to 43.97. So
Weird.
it's all over the place. It's really weird. So hopefully Jensen and Shabbat together is a good fit, and we can get those
Hmm.
numbers up.
Yeah. Um, That would be great. Just having someone for Shabbat to play with consistently.
Hmm.
Um, Probably if you're playing, I guess outside of Zub, like if you're playing Jensen with Shabbat, probably the best D partner he's had since DeMello.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's looking up. Like I think the way we're looking at things so far, we're saying how like probably wasn't a fair price for Chychrun, but when you're looking at it so far, what we've talked about, right? We've talked about Allmark, which is a huge upgrade on goaltending, the best upgrade on goaltending this team has had in I don't know how many years now, since Anderson, basically, since prime Craig Anderson. And then you look at the defense, and as much as it sucks not getting fair value or like what is perceived to be fair value for Chychrun, all of a sudden the top four looks good.
Hmm. I
Um,
think so.
it's all positive so far, which is nice. As far as like if you ignore the price of everything, what's on the ice, I feel a really good amount of confidence in the defense being upgraded, not just from Allmark, but from having, you know, Nick Jensen, who is, by all accounts should be defensively sound, even if he doesn't have a full bounce back. Like it should be okay. So I'm feeling happy about that. How do you
Hmm.
feel about third pairing? How it's looking right now?
That's exactly what I was going to mention. I was going to say I fully agree with you in terms of the top four because I do not like the third pairing as it is. I think the fact that we just let Eric Branstrom walk and he only made 900K on the open market, I feel like could he really have demanded that much more to stay here? I feel like you could
Yeah,
have
I mean, if they
even.
qualified him, it would have been two.
That's the
But like,
thing.
do you just
You just
not
don't
qualify him and
don't
then offer
qualify him.
1.1?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what I think. Even though
But
they don't think he fits stylistically or in terms of his size, I feel like he could push Travis Hamonic out of the lineup. You can play him on
yeah,
the right side, and that would be preferable. That's my major problem is that Travis Hamonic is penciled into the top six right now. That's the big problem. And even on the left side, you don't really have any other options other than Tyler Klevin, right? Like if Tyler Klevin struggles as a rookie and you need to send him down, what the hell are you gonna do? You don't have Branstrom
on the flip
anymore.
side of that though, if you're Eric Branstrom and Ottawa says, "Hey, you want to come back for 1.1?" Then Colorado says, "Hey, do you want to come play here for 900K and have a shot at a cup?"
Yeah, that's fair.
That's a tough choice.
That's fair. He
Maybe
may
or
have
maybe it
just
isn't.
wanted
Maybe
to
it just
move
isn't
on.
a tough choice.
Hmm. He may well have just wanted to move on, which just brings me to the point of with the remaining cap space, I really want to see a third pairing defenseman acquired,
Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
one of the guys left in free agency or if you can find someone cheap in a trade who's kind of
Hmm.
slipping through the cracks in another team's like top six, maybe not in their top six, but could be in ours. You got to figure
Yeah.
something like that out because Travis Hamonic cannot be an everyday player. I wouldn't even really want him to be the seventh D. I would have wanted him to be bought out for a little more cap space.
Yeah.
But best case, if you're keeping him, he should probably be your eighth D. I would rather see
Yeah.
Matt Timpalo or Max Gannett playing ahead of him. So
I
it's rough.
I I think a year from now, depending on how things go, I might be more open to a Clevin JBD third pairing.
You know what? I completely forgot about JBD, which shows how highly I value his asset to the team.
Yeah,
I forgot.
I don't know. I think it could work. I just don't have a ton of faith in it
Hmm.
right now.
And it's two young guys. JBD was a rookie last season, right? And Clevin is a rookie this season. It's not like it's just risky to just go with that.
Hmm.
If one of them falters, your only option is Travis Hamonic at the moment, or Gannett, bringing him up from
Yeah, and I
Belleville.
feel like just inevitably with injuries, you got to imagine a Clevin JBD pairing is going to be seen at some point.
Definitely.
I'd just rather see that for the first time in December rather than October, whatever the first game of the season is, 10th.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's a bit it's risky. We were just saying how, we're finally happy with the top four that the Sens have put together just for like to have zero faith in the third pair. It doesn't feel right. And I think you mentioned already the cap space available at 1.9.
Hmm.
Um, Defensemen are pricey. Even third pair defensemen are pricey. So
They are the only thing that I'm clinging to for some hope is like Justin Schultz, Kevin Shattenkirk, and Tyson Berry. I'll throw those three names out there of who's left in free agency. The fact that none of them have signed yet leads me to think that none of them are going to be making very much over $1 million. Otherwise, they'd already have
yeah,
signed. Schultz was only making 3 million previously, and so he's not getting a raise on that. Maybe like 2 mil, which would be too much for us. But Shattenkirk was also only making 1 million last year anyway, so you can give him a comparable contract if he would want to come here. And Tyson Barrie was making a lot more previously. He was making like 4 million or something. I lost where he was on the screen. Yeah, 4.5 million. But he's sort of fallen off the map a little bit, but could still be an option for cheap. I think I would like to see any one of those guys in terms of free agents, but those are like really the only names that look remotely interesting. Anyone else, it's like you're really digging like the bottom of the barrel. You know what? Maybe Travis Dermott. I see him there too. I don't mind him. I think he's more of a lefty though. But
yeah, I mean, if so, Justin Schultz, depending on how much he wants to take. I remember when he was a UFA because he never signed with Anaheim after he was drafted. And it came down to Edmonton and Ottawa.
You're right. I forgot about that.
I mean, if Ottawa was the runner-up when he was being signed out of college, I think there's a legitimate chance he might still want to come to Ottawa. That said, does he say yes to 1.2 or below? That's, and then if you do that, I guess if you sign him for 1.2, you got 700K, you send JBD down, that would give you just over $1 million to sign a depth forward. That might work depending on how the money works. If it's working how it does in my brain, which I would not bet on. I'm terrible at math, but I think that would still give you about, like, say you sign him, then replace JBD, send JBD down. That should give you about $1 million to sign a fourth line forward, because currently
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
One more defenseman and one more forward for like $1 million each or a little less than $1 million,
Yeah, I think Justin Schultz would be very fun. Then I guess you just put him with Clevin and hope for the best with Clevin. Like, I don't mind Clevin starting the season in Ottawa this year. Just, I mean, out of purely like like who else is going to play the left side on that third pair? Not too many options.
It's definitely the plan. It's definitely what they're going to go with. Unless they surprise us and make some other move. But it seems like the obvious thing is to just give him the chance and get a good partner for him to play with on the right-hand side.
Yeah, that's the thing too, right? Like, I think that's part of the reason why I was so scared of that Clevin JBD conversation. Like, that's two young players. And not that I think that any old player is going to be fine. Like, I don't want a Clevin Hamnick third pairing. But like, I think it would help to have someone with, a decent amount of experience. So yeah, Justin Schultz, Tyler Clevin, that could be a lot of fun. I guess, yeah. I guess that's, yeah. I'd be happy with that. I'd be perfectly happy with that.
When we mentioned that if no other moves are made, our rating for the offseason could go down a little bit. That's my main one for the defense, is that if Travis Hamonic is either your number 6 or number 7, depending on if you see him as ahead of Bernard Docker, that's unacceptable in my opinion. And that would knock the whole rating for the offseason down from a B- to like a C, in my opinion. You need to get someone else in there.
Yeah, no, Travis Hamonic to be the number 7. Yeah. Travis Hamonic to be the number 7 at the very least, and I think we just have to accept that probably.
So from there, we might as well go into the forward group, because that's pretty much what all the other moves were for the Sens. In terms of chronological order, right after the Jakob Chychrun trade, we got the Noah Gregor signing. Probably not too much to say about this, but a little bit. I think stylistically he's similar to Mathieu Joseph, who was moved out, and for way cheaper. Obviously, he's not going to put up as many points as Joseph did, but it was also a question of if Joseph would be able to put up as many points again as he did at the beginning of last season. So I think getting a speedy winger for the bottom 6 for way cheaper, I think that was the idea there.
Yeah, I think he can probably play center too.
I think so.
Just stick him anywhere on that fourth line. I'm happy with the deal. A defensively sound player who, before we started recording, you looked this up because I was looking it up and I was having a tough time finding it. But you did find that Gregor did play a decent amount of time on the PK with the Leafs last season. So fine by me. Defensively solid player who can play on the PK. I'll take it for the fourth line. Absolutely. If it's not, like, I'll take I'll take anyone that that I think can play ahead of Zach McEwen, honestly.
Definitely. And I would say that we need one more player like that too, because the depth chart, most depth charts would include him currently, and if you wanted to get him out of there, you'd have to put in Crookshank, put in Ostapchuk, and maybe put in someone else too, like Yarventi, just to push him down. So
Mhm.
I like ideally he would be starting in Belleville if it was for me, but similar to Hamonic, at best he would have to be like the healthy scratch, you know?
Yeah, and I do think that there is something to be said about the possibility of a Crookshank, Gregor, Stopchuk fourth line. Like I
Yeah,
wouldn't hate it. I'd feel a little uneasy, a little bit, but like it could be very fun.
it could
So
be.
I wouldn't hate it.
I think it just shouldn't be the plan A basically. I
Hmm.
think Crookshank will be on the team. I think he should impress at camp. He impressed everyone last season, so I think he's only going to get better. And I think Ostapchuk should be like the first call up option in Belleville. He's the guy that you bring up right away as soon
Yeah,
as you need an extra forward. I just don't know if I would pencil both of them in at once at the start of the
yeah,
season.
completely agree. Yeah.
Hmm. But after that, we got the David Perron signing, 2 years, $4 million cap hit, and I'll just say right away, as soon as that happened, I tweeted out I do not like David Perron. But I'm warming up to it now. I think I'm biased because of the whole Zub situation last year where he got the was it 5 or 6 game suspension for that cross check. I'm very sensitive to the cross checks to the head because I've been concussed by one before, and I think that's just one of the like dirtiest things you can do in hockey, especially when it's not even during the play in terms of any kind of net from battle. It was just targeting a guy after the play. Um, and he even before that happened, I didn't really like him too much because he had some incidents in the playoffs with the Blues when they were playing against the Avalanche and just taking runs at Nazem Kadri. There was a flying elbow that just barely missed Kadri after he had scored a goal, and he was also fined $5,000, I think it was, for a cross check on Kadri in that playoff series. So I don't like his sort of dirty past, but throughout his whole career, it is at least not too frequent. Those are fairly recent incidents, and he's been in the league for a long time. So I just hope that he doesn't do anything like that with the Sens and get himself in some hot water like he did last season, and then I'll probably be cool with it. He's been doing media interviews lately, and I think he's been saying all the right things. He is endearing himself to the fan base, just like Linus Hallmark was. All these guys have been doing really good media tours. Nick Jensen had
Yeah.
some good interviews too.
Yeah. If nothing else, the Sens have a great PR team. That's
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, so the interviews and stuff are making me more. I'm starting to warm up more to the idea of David Perron on my hockey team. And the only thing is, though, 36 years old, 2 year deal, and his point production dropped last season. I had, what was it? I think the J Fresh card open. A lot of his best production and minutes are on the power play, not as good even strength. I don't know if that's indicative of how the Red Wings played overall or if it's all on the player, but like it'll be good for him to help out our power play, I suppose, but hopefully his even strength numbers bounce back a bit, because if his production just keeps dropping in his old age, it's going to be a bad signing. But if he can stay at least 45, 50 points, then that'll be good, I would say.
Yeah, especially if the plan is because I haven't seen any indication that this is necessarily what the team is thinking, but basically everyone I've seen on Twitter put together like their ideal Sens lineup as it is right now. Most people have him on the third line with Norris playing second line wing, with Pinto being the second line center. So if it just sticks to that and you have like a third line of David Perron, I guess Ridley Gregg and Mike Amadio, it's not the worst thing ever. I think that David Perron gives you a bit of flexibility too. If there's an injury, it's not the end of the world if he's playing on your second line for a little bit. As long as he still can, like you said, put together like a decent number of points. Um, Power play merchant or not, we'll see if that's how he plays with the Sens. Similar thing to Nick Jensen, is that down year just a down year that he can bounce back from, or is that trend going to continue as the age goes up? So are we upset with a 45-point season out of him? I don't think we're upset. I think we're like a little bit bummed if that's where he
I
maxes
think
out
it would
at.
be okay. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
super happy with it, but it's not bad by any means.
Yeah, like I'll take I don't know, 20 goals, 45 points. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If he's your third liner, second unit power play, that's fine. As long as it doesn't dip into like a 35 point territory and we're like, oh,
Mm-hmm. That's the
hmm.
thing is, uh, we saw David Legwand play for the Sens. We saw Derek
Yeah.
Stepan play for the Sens, and we saw Alex Burrows play for the Sens. All given like all acquired with like multi-year deals, either signing or through trade at around the age of like 34 or 35, and we're like, oh, they're a good second liner, and then they're not, and then we move on from them real quick. Legwand traded before his contract was up after just 1 year. Stepan, we got rid of him real quick. I don't even remember what the move was, but he did not last long, and Burrows had to get bought out. So my main thing is the fact that this is a 2-year deal for a 36-year-old scares me a little bit. If he could keep it up this year and then really drop off in the second year, which would suck. Because then he's 38 by the end of the deal, which is tough.
Was David Legwand part of the Leonard trade to Buffalo?
He was, yeah.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah, the step on trade, I don't remember if anything happened. I think he just left. Like, I think didn't he just play? Like, wasn't that the last year of his contract and he just kind of disappeared?
Could be.
I think he played like a dozen games with the Sens and then he was just not there. I don't actually fully remember what happened.
Hmm.
Um,
But regardless, it reminds me of those moves because they were all
yeah,
really good players before the Sens acquired them, but they were old and then they started to hit that age wall right as they started playing for the Sens. So I just hope that that doesn't happen with David Perron. I'm not saying that it will happen. That's just my worry. So it's like on paper, you sign a guy who had about 20 goals and 45 points last year for 4 million. That's great. I would just ideally have preferred it to be a 1-year deal. But what are you going to do? Probably needed the second year to convince him to come here.
yeah. Like, I don't think we're in a position now where we can still say nobody wants to come to Ottawa. I don't think that's true. I think maybe people don't necessarily want to play for the Senators more than they don't want to come and live in Ottawa. But I still do have to remind myself that there is going to be an Ottawa tax, not necessarily because Ottawa's
Definitely.
bad, but just not because it's just because Ottawa isn't as good as other places to be, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we saw Victor Arvidsson sign in Edmonton for the exact same contract, and I got mad and I was like, oh no, wait, hold on. Is Victor Arvidsson going to get to play with McDavid or Draisaitl in Ottawa? No, like
Exactly.
there's a huge incentive there. Also, Edmonton 1 game away from the Stanley Cup. Like it's a whole different thing. So yeah, the
That's
Sens are gonna have to
yeah.
pay more for worse players, and that's just the reality of it until they can start consistently making the playoffs. And then maybe we get to see some better signings. Not necessarily to say that David Perron's gonna be a bad signing. I'm not saying that on July 11th. Like I'm not making that claim. Just in general, painting with like extremely broad strokes. When the team is consistently good again, when we get that run of whatever it was, making the playoffs every year from what like 97 through like 2008, like if we can see that again, then it's going to become, maybe not so much a destination because Ottawa's never going to be like the top of anyone's, you know, locations to live list out of, all the places in the league, but at the very least, a place where players are going to want to come and play. Then we can kind of see that. So I think the dollar amount is fair value now. Ask me again in January when we see how he's playing, if he's bouncing back. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I think it makes sense. If the plan is having him on the third line, I think it's totally fine.
I think so too. I think that's where he slots in is third line, either right wing or left wing. And it should also be noted that like a major part of the signing too is the leadership that they hope he'll bring to the team.
Hmm.
He's been speaking about it a lot in interviews in terms of he really wants to be a part of the solution to turning this team into a playoff team. And for despite my criticisms of him, he was a part of that in Detroit. Even though they didn't make the playoffs, they improved both years while he was there. I think he was there for
Yep.
2 years. Regardless, they improved over the course of the time that he was there, and they only missed by 1 point last year, and he was a big part of that. So I think that from that angle, it's a good idea to bring him in. I had a tweet saved from Ryan Hanna from the Winged Wheel Pod. He said he really loved what Perron brought to this team on and off the ice. Big part of the changed mentality in Detroit and breaking out of the culture of losing, even though he's kind of started to lose a step in that last year. So I think that's the key of this signing is that they want him to help with breaking out of the losing culture that we've had here, and he did help with that in Detroit. So
Yep.
that's the positive for me.
Yeah, all good points. And like I said before, you need someone else other than Drew who's older than me in the top nine. Like
Yeah.
uh gotta have at least some experience in there, whether it's, whether you're someone who is, whatever end of the spectrum you are on hockey, whether you love stats or you love intangibles, like there's got to be some middle ground in there somewhere. And you know, I'm fine with it as long as the plan is, third line and not to put too much pressure on him to make, the biggest swing for the team. I think it's totally fine.
Hmm. Yeah, and then the last move, I believe it was on July 1st, at least for the NHL roster, was one more addition to the forward group being Michael Amadio, which is a bit of a funny one because he is a former Senator for only 5 games, and even funnier to me is that he's a former Leaf in the same season for only 3 games. So somehow both of those teams completely gave up on him, just like dismissed him rather quickly, and then he became a pretty good player in Vegas, and I'm happy to see him returning, even though when he left, he was kind of an afterthought. But he got a very good chance to show what he could do in Vegas and became a pretty good bottom six forward. This was the one move on July 1st that right away I was like, yeah, that's good. It's a good deal. It's a good player. So I'm very happy with that signing overall. The 2.6 million cap hit, I think for 3 years it was.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Like I will wait and see how he performs, obviously, but just off the initial reaction, it was the move I was the most happy with so far.
Yeah. How do you feel about it when you add context of, if you add the context of Matthew Joseph being traded away and looking at it like Amadio as his replacement? How do you feel if you look at it all together, or do you avoid looking at it all together?
Um, Well, when we signed him, I was immediately like, okay, 2.6 million cap hit for a third liner, and they're looking to dump the 2.9 million cap hit of another third liner. So right away, I was like, yeah, he's basically the Joseph replacement in terms of the money
Hmm.
allocated on the bottom six of the roster. In terms of essentially swapping those players, I think that they're probably, I would say they're probably even in terms of like value that they bring to a team. It's just that Amadio comes in a little cheaper and he has a different style of play. Joseph is the super speedy guy. Amadio, I think, is a little more physical. So,
Hmm.
so I think it's probably like we know that this management likes big players and physical players early on. That seems to be a bit of a motto, especially with their draft. And I think Joseph, despite being a bottom six forward, doesn't have too much of a physical game in terms of hitting. So they might like Amadio a little bit better in terms of that, a little more size. So that's what I think. I think it's just swapping out a third liner of sort of similar production for another one who has a little bit of a style of play that they prefer for their new coach and what the new management likes.
Yeah. My main problem with it is I'm looking at, like, you're trading Joseph in the third for Amadio, even though that's not what it was.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of a third round pick to dump Joseph, I don't know. I probably should be able to look at them as two separate transactions. Um, because I think I'm just, like, going back to what I said before about a lot of these moves. I understand why they're being made. I just don't know if it's the smartest asset management. Like,
Mm-hmm.
costing a third round pick to dump Matthew Joseph when, in my opinion, he's not on a bad contract. He's a perfectly serviceable third line winger who you can comfortably place on your top PK and be happy about it. Um, so the cost of, using a pick to dump that contract for nothing, replacing him with a guy who's basically got the difference in cap it between Amadio and Joseph is less than half of a league min deal. You're not giving yourself any wiggle room there at all. I do think that I completely agree with you that I think Amadio probably fits what this team wants their bottom six to look like a little bit more than Joseph. I think, Amadio hasn't hit 35 points in an NHL season, which is what Joseph hit last season. But I do think Amadio probably has a higher upside for offense on a more consistent basis. I think there's a really good chance he'll outscore Joseph next season unless St. Louis is decimated with injuries and Joseph is consistently getting second line time, which could happen. You never know. I like Amadio. I think he's going to be very solid. He projects to, you'd think probably about 15 goals, somewhere upwards of around 30 points. And
Mm-hmm.
plays solid defense.
15
One
goals
thing
a
I did want
year
to bring
on
up,
the third line.
yeah,
I like that.
I think him, Perron, and Greg could make for a very good third line.
Yeah, that sounds good to
Um,
me.
and we did talk about, specifically I wanted to look up, has Noah Gregor played the PK consistently because by all accounts, Mike Amadio projects really, really well defensively, which is great. That's what you want in your bottom six. But I looked it up, and he in the last 3 seasons with Vegas, he has a combined just shy 16 minutes on the PK.
Okay, that's a surprise to me. I wasn't
I was
expecting that.
shocked by that. I triple checked that because I was like, that's
Hmm.
wild. So I don't know. I'm kind of the really basic monkey brain where I'm like, if you're good at defense, you'll be fine on the PK. Like I know it's not that simple,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like I feel
And
like if you're replacing Joseph, you probably want someone who has like a bit of like like a bit of more experience on the PK. I think you can stick Amadio on the PK and be fine with it. Like I'm
mm,
sure he'll be just fine because it's not like they're doing the whole the Sens had their period, the Guy Boucher time when they brought in their PK specialists who were just guys who can't score. Like when you bring in Christy Domenico or Nate Thompson, and because they're PK specialists, like PK specialists aren't just guys who don't score points. You know what I mean? Like it's I think Amadio's gonna be perfectly fine on the PK. I was just shocked to find out I think it's like 1550 he has total ice time on the penalty kill in the last 3 seasons.
yeah, and I just checked the average time on ice shorthanded per game on Vegas of all the forwards, and his average last season was 5 seconds per game. So and in total he played 6 minutes of penalty kill in the entire season.
Okay.
So that's a shock to me. I thought that it was going to be significantly more than that. I didn't realize that he
hmm
hasn't been a penalty killer. I had no clue.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's not the end of the world if you don't put him on the PK, but like who do you want? Like, I think you want you I don't know. I don't know. With Gregor now, like, do you want Pinto and Stutzla as your 1-2 punch at center on PK? I think that's probably what I would do. And then it's just
Yeah.
a matter of filling out with two wingers. So like if you just have them and then you probably want, I don't know, maybe Amadio and maybe who do you trust defensively to play that second PK
Well,
unit?
the last couple of years we have seen Stutzla do really well on the penalty kill. They might
Yeah,
they
like I'm
might go
happy with
back to
him.
that. I could see Norris continuing the penalty kill. I think he has in the past too. We used Giroux on the penalty kill a lot last year. Preferably for me, I'd like to see the top six forwards not have to penalty kill unless they're exceptionally good at it, and just have a bottom
hmm
six that those are the guys you throw out there on the penalty kill, so you keep your top six guys fresh
Right.
to come out and score some goals after you get some momentum from killing a penalty, or keep them fresh for the power play. But so I don't know. Like if we just look at the bottom six, like Gregor, really Greg as well. Greg and Gregor, you can probably put them both on the penalty kill. Pinto, maybe Amadio, but he isn't really a penalty killer. So that's three, maybe four guys. Um, I don't know about Perron. I don't think he's a penalty killer. It's not a lot of penalty killing capability in the bottom six. Like they're probably gonna have to be putting their top six guys out there, especially the centers.
Yeah, and I mean we've seen Stutzla be extremely effective on the PK, so I'd be fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
Side note, do you think Ridley Gregg's nickname is Gregor and now they're gonna have a real
Oh my
problem?
god, that would be really funny. You have to have like if he's Gregor, then you have to call Noah Gregor like Greg Z or something like that. They need to have
It's
like
gonna
the
be
two
it's yeah,
variants.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's that's gonna suck.
that's funny. Hopefully they just call him like Ridley or the Riddler or something,
Yeah,
and then they won't have a nickname problem. But that's funny. I didn't think
exactly.
of that. Um, but yeah, I guess in terms of the forward group, the only other major move that happened was Sokolov out for Jenik, which is a little bit interesting. I think Jenik could be a fourth line option, but maybe not right away this season. Like he might need a little bit more of AHL time, but he is more of a big guy who is more physical than Sokolov, obviously, because Sokolov has some size, but he's all skill, he's all offense. Um, so I like the acquisition of Jenik in terms of the player type, and in terms of production in the AHL, he's not quite on the level of Sokolov, but he still has good AHL production, and he's had a handful, like a few dozen of NHL games over the last 3 years. So he's probably going to be one of the top call up options if he doesn't make
Yeah.
the team right away. So I thought that was a pretty good trade.
Yeah, I was fine with it. I'm not super familiar with his game, to be honest. So I think part of it also had to do with what's the number again for like AHL games? Because your AHL roster can only have a certain number of guys who have played more than
Yeah,
whatever number of
the
games.
veteran rule. I don't remember the exact
Yeah.
number. It might have been 250 games. But regardless, Sokolov has way more AHL games played than Jenik.
Hmm.
Jenik is a guy that they can keep in the AHL longer without hitting that veteran spot. So
Yeah.
that's an extra little thing that helps as well.
Yeah. I think it's fine. Just a matter of, it's a shame because Sokolov, fan favorite, all-time leading scorer in Belleville, right?
Hmm.
So that's kind of a shame. But if there was no room for him on the NHL team, I'm happy to see him go somewhere that, hopefully there will be some room for him, or at least, where he feels like he can work his way up. There's a chance there. So,
Yeah.
which is silly to say when we're talking about how the Sens need to add depth but
It
it is
just
what it is.
yeah, it's depth of a certain type because we need penalty killers and we need physicality in the bottom six, and that's clearly size and physicality is clearly what this management is looking for.
Mhm.
So Sokolov doesn't really fit that. It just makes sense to move on from him, and it was pretty good to get a player back who could potentially fit that archetype. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, in terms of the forward group, if we I would like to see one more player added, but it's slim pickings in free agency. Like uh, I don't know, Tyler Johnson for league minimum maybe. Who
You don't
else?
want him on the PK, I don't think. Like, unless
No,
he's completely shifted his game in the last 2 years and I haven't noticed.
yeah. Cal Clutterbuck could be fun, but that's another like really old guy. Like he'll go out there and hit like crazy, but is he still good? Like is he gonna be able to keep up other than
Yeah,
just
is
hitting
that an
people?
improvement on McEwen? That's the question, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't hate seeing that. I think the main one that I would like, the name that jumps out at me is Nick Cousins. I'm surprised that he hasn't signed anywhere yet. Um, Fans hate him because he's a complete rat and like embellishing, and he may or may not be a good person. I think he has some things in his past, but in terms of hockey, he was a very effective pest for the Panthers, and that would be useful to the Sens for sure. So I that would be useful to any team. So I'm surprised that he's still available. So that's another name,
Yeah.
and he can play center or wing too, which is useful.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, other than that, there's not really any good names still available. Like Tanner Pearson is kind of cooked. Alex Barabanov, maybe he could be like maybe a PTO or something, but I want to give that guy like a guaranteed contract. Chris Tierney, we could bring Chris Tierney back. Oh my god,
I honestly I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it.
it would be really funny. Um, Sam Gagne maybe would be okay.
That'd be a really fun PTO.
Yeah,
That would
probably
be a great
PTO.
PTO. That'd be awesome.
Hmm. Other than that, though, it's pretty rough. Sammy Blay, maybe he only had one goal in 53 games.
I
So
was gonna say you want someone else to hit everything that moves.
yeah,
Yeah.
he would be good for that. But like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but I still feel like we need one more fourth line piece. Is the thing.
Yeah. And I do think that we need to acknowledge the fact that we're in a place where we're happy with the roster as long as they add, the most, as far as depth pieces go, we're looking for a fourth line forward and a third pairing defenseman. And then I think we're happy with how the team looks. And I think that's a really good place to be in as a fan base. Like, I think we're, not to say that we're overly optimistic because we as a fan base have declared Ottawa the winner of the last two off seasons leading up to this one. And we were so confident about playoffs and everything. But just to say that, like, I feel like with the added expectations of, like obviously expectations last season, and we're going into this season thinking, okay, well, we want expectations and like there is an expectation to make the playoffs. And the extra pressure of doing it after being disappointing last season. And even with all of that, we're at a point now where we're like, and maybe part of that is because of the cap situation, but honestly, like whether the cap space was 1.9 like it is now or 3.5, I still think I'd be looking for the exact same thing, depth pieces.
Hmm.
So I do think that the team is in a really good position on paper. Um, and for the second year in a row, it's playoffs or bust.
Definitely. Yeah, you make a great point that the only holes that we're talking about are the bottom of the lineup positions. Like I want
Yeah.
one more fourth liner and one more third pairing D. That's much better than when we went into the offseason saying we really need a top four right D and we really need a starting goalie. Those are going to be the hardest things to get, and we did get them, regardless of which right D you preferred to get
Hmm.
or the perceived value of Jakob Chychrun in a trade. We did get what we needed on the team, so the holes to fill are small, which is good, which is very good. Um, and then I guess the last thing that we didn't really touch on is the Shane Pinto extension for 2 years, 3.5
Yeah.
million cap hit. I think I kind of forgot about it until now, just because I don't think I have that much to say about it. I think it's just good. Um, Especially, I think bridge deal was the way to go for Pinto, because if you had signed him to 5 or 6 million right away here, then you wouldn't have any room to bring in any more pieces,
Yeah.
and you may have
Yeah.
not even had room to sign like Amadio or Perron. It would have had to been like one or the other, right? So I think
Yeah.
overall the Pinto signing is pretty good, eh?
Yeah. I think this is one of those, and also just worth noting as well, we haven't seen a bridge deal in Ottawa in a long time.
I guess
Been a
so, eh?
lot of long contracts, with
Everyone getting $8 million right away.
yeah, yeah, Shabbat, Sanderson, Kachuk,
Stutzla as
Norris,
well.
uh,
Everyone.
Stutzla,
That was the
um,
Dorian way. He did not like bridge deals.
yeah, Batherson even like not 8 million, but like a
Hmm.
long contract right off the bat.
And most of those are
Colin
good, but
White
most
as
of those are good. But
well.
yes, Colin White is the
Yeah.
one that was not good, and Josh Norris is up in the air just because of his injury history. If he was fully
Yeah.
healthy this whole time, I think no one would be questioning the contract. But
Yeah,
uh,
I still firmly believe if he's healthy, he can put up 40 goals.
mhm.
Like he's that good. Yeah, no, I think the bridge deal works just like you said. If it wasn't a bridge deal, then I think they could only afford the bridge deal, right? If
Mhm.
they wanted to fill out the roster.
They
And I think it works out great.
pretty much had to move Joseph as well. Like we were talking about moving Joseph to sign
Yeah.
like Amadio, but it was also, I think the Joseph move, they had already signed Amadio, and then the Joseph move came right before the Pinto extension, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it had to be done for that too.
Yeah.
They needed
And
to make room just to do the bridge deal and also to make the additions they wanted, so they couldn't really have
yeah.
had space for a long-term deal.
And I think worth noting too, I think the real dollars, so it's a cap hit of 375. I think the real dollars are 2.5, then 5. So his
Okay.
qualifying offer following that is going to be 5. So I think depending on how he plays, we could be, looking at. I mean, I honestly think he's going to outplay that contract both these seasons. He had what did he have? He had 27 points in 41 games last year,
Something like that.
something like that.
I
And
think it was,
like,
yeah. I think it was 9 goals, 18 assists, so dead on.
yeah, and it's and I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I feel like, he probably went into last season with, he probably wasn't at his best mentally just because of the suspension, probably
No training
stressed out
camp
about
as well.
that. Like, yeah, so I think you have a guy like him playing 2 full seasons. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think he's going to be a no doubt second line level center. Like, I think he already is that now, but I think he's going to prove any doubters wrong in the next 2 seasons, if not just next season. I think he's a great fit there, and I think he's going to be pretty expensive after these 2 years. So
Hmm.
make the most of it while you have him at that cap hit.
The
Sends
real
management.
dollars there is interesting because it's almost like if he was asking for say a long-term deal at like 5 or 6 million, it's almost like a 1 year bridge at a cheaper contract or
Yeah,
cheaper cap hit and salary for the first year, and then the second year it gets close to probably what he would have asked for on a long term deal. So
yeah,
I think that was a good compromise by Steve Stales. I think that was clever work with the contract there.
yeah. I wonder what a second line center is supposed to make in 2 years with the cap going up.
Yeah, definitely more than 5 million.
Yeah, like I would say right now, if you're signing a legit second line center, you're probably looking at 7. So a couple years from now,
Hmm.
he might be the next guy to make 8 million, just based on if the cap keeps going up like it's supposed to, allegedly. I
Yeah.
mean, we've heard that a long
Hell,
time, but
we already saw the Chandler Stevenson contract, which was
oh
like
my God,
six
yeah.
six
Oh
point
my
something.
God.
So that's
Yeah.
that's already like getting into the new range for a second line center, even with the cap
Yeah.
only going up a certain amount this year, it's going to go up even
Yeah.
more.
And with that term too.
Hmm.
So if you're signing a second line center for like 3 years right now, it's probably, yeah, 7.5, 8. So Pinto might be very expensive
Hmm.
in the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's like you could argue that a long-term deal would have been best because then you save a little bit money later, but at least with the cap
Yeah.
going up, I think it's smarter to get him to the bridge deal now to fit in more depth on the roster, and then with the
Hmm.
cap going up, you will have the money to pay him more.
Yeah, for sure. It makes the most sense for now. That's a problem to deal with in 2 years.
Hmm. But yeah, I think that about does it for our off-season recap. If anything else major surprising happens later in the summer, we'll definitely be back to talk about that. I didn't float this idea to you yet, Charlie, but I was thinking maybe an upcoming episode we could do is like division standings predictions for the Atlantic Division. Go
Ooh,
through every
yeah.
team. That might be fun.
Let's do it. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Let's
so
do
you
that.
guys can look forward to that too.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And we will delete that episode promptly 2 months into the season.
Yeah. Oh, I did on my other podcast we did full standings predictions before last season, and some of them were bad. Some of them
I
were
haven't checked
really
mine,
bad.
actually. I made mine before the season started. I don't think I looked.
Hmm.
I'll have to double check. I'll have to
So
see if how bad that was.
at least maybe if we're just doing the Sens division, maybe it won't be that bad. But going across the whole league, you're bound to get some wrong because there's always surprise good
Yeah.
teams and surprise bad teams. But I feel like within a division, you can sort of lay out what to expect.
Yeah, that should be fun. And we can piss off all the division rivals,
Hmm.
but at the same time.
Yeah. But that'll do it for today. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching or listening. Subscribe to Game Over Ottawa because we will be back with live shows after every Senators game next season. So look forward to that and some more off-season content as well coming up.
Absolutely. Don't miss anything. It's all quality. Nothing but the best for Game Over Ottawa viewers.